Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and I'm delighted to welcome this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, Matt Theriault, the embodiment of Cruise Life Matt, a blog, YouTube channel, and an Instagram account comprised of stunning images of ships. It was on Instagram that Matt first caught my attention. His IG feed is comprised almost exclusively of cruise ship photography, mostly stunning drone footage. Matt is an FAA certified drone pilot. As a result of those amazing images, Matt is extremely popular on IG with over 100,000 followers. Matt also has a second IG account, RV Camping to Go, featuring RVs, camping, and family travel. Matt has a YouTube channel, more great drone shots, and some videos from his family vacations. However, it was the Cruise Life Matt blog and his accompanying Facebook group where I got the best sense for his passion for cruising and sharing that passion with his followers. His amazing images led me to Matt, but the Cruise Life Matt blog and Facebook group led me to invite Matt to the Joy of Cruising podcast to share his passion with the listeners. Matt started cruising in 2004. His first cruise was on the Caribbean Princess, and he is one of the many who got hooked on their first cruise. Matt has since sailed over 65 times. He says, "Cruising is my true passion in life. When I cannot be on board a cruise ship, you can most likely find me talking about them or planning my next cruise vacation." Welcome, Matt, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
So how you doing?
Doing all right. As you know, I just got back from a cruise last week, so trying to get back into the swing of things. Getting back to work and trying to deal with that post-cruise depression. It is real, by the way. It is a real thing.
Oh, tell me about it. So before we discuss Cruise Life Matt, tell our listeners about yourself, where you're from, where you live, what's your background, anything you would like to share.
Awesome. So I'm born and raised here up in Connecticut. I've never lived anywhere else. I'm 41 years old now, so it is definitely home to me. My wife and I got married back in 2010. We have a daughter who is 10 and a son who is 8. I have way too many hobbies, never enough time to do them all. Cruising probably gets the biggest share of that pie. So hence the moniker Cruise Life Matt. But yeah, have some access to sailings up here in New York, but the hot spot of Florida is always a flight away.
Yeah, I heard you say you have too many hobbies. We'll talk about some of those. I can relate to a couple.
Okay.
But before we do, I understand you as you said, you just got back from a cruise. So where did you go and how was it?
So I sailed 7 nights on the Norwegian Jade out of Athens, Greece. It was a combination Greek islands and Holy Land itinerary. So we had ports of call in Greece, Turkey, Israel, and Cyprus. It was all new ports to me. I had never been to that part of the world before. Some stunning sights, some amazing old history. I mean, here in the U.S., we don't have anything like that, right? I mean, there's nothing around here that's 3, 4, 5,000 years old. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. That you were standing in these sites where things happened historically so long ago. It was almost a little emotional at points to think about it that way. And I mean, everything as far as the ship goes, no complaints. I feel like the Jade is a perfect class of ship for a port intensive itinerary. You know, there's not a ton of bells and whistles, but you also have all the types of specialty dining venues and a lot of options as far as dining and food goes. The only thing that I would caution is, you know, people with kids. There's not, you know, all the water slides and all that kind of stuff for them. But for me, yeah, it was a perfect ship for that itinerary.
Does the Jade have the go-karts?
It does not. So the Jade is in the Jewel class. So sisters with the Jewel, the Gem, and the Pearl. I might be missing one. But yeah, it's like a 90,000 ton ship. So a little bit on the smaller side in today's standards. But still plenty to keep me occupied for a week.
Yeah, I haven't been on NCL too many times. I guess twice I've been on NCL. My last cruise actually was on NCL. Their oldest ship, the NCL Spirit, although it felt like it was new because it's undergone $100 million refurbishment in the last couple of years.
Right.
Have you been on other NCL ships?
I have. I've probably been on, I don't know, maybe like 20-ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's your line of choice, I
No,
assume.
there's really three. I mean, Carnival, Norwegian, and Royal. I kind of, you know, go between them interchangeably. I think Carnival technically holds the lead for having the most. I think I might be somewhere around like 25 or so. But yeah, it's, you know, I don't really have a favorite per se. But I
Hmm.
love the NCL product, and you know, hence why I was on the trip last week.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like you. I don't have a favorite. I guess I'm what's called cruise
Yep.
agnostic. So I've never gone on the same line twice in a row.
Okay.
I've gone on the same line twice, but not twice in a row. So I pride myself on trying new things. In fact, I've got three cruises booked, and all three are on lines I've never been on. So.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Uh, so you've been cruising almost 20
Just
years.
about.
Uh, Talk about your cruising background.
So back in 2004, I had never been on a cruise before. My parents, they had done some cruising when me and my brother were kids, but never brought us along. It was sort of their adults only vacation from time to time. And
Hmm.
so you know, I had some insight to what they were like, but I had never gone on one myself. And at that time, I think I was a senior in college, and my parents said, "Hey, you know, we're planning this cruise for this coming summer. You know, would you want to join us?" And you know, I thought about it. Asked my girlfriend at the time if she would want to go, and make a long story short, we ended up booking. And you know, I didn't really know how I would like the experience. I knew how my parents liked it. But pretty much the second I got on board, I knew that this was for me. Um, you
Hmm.
know, the stepping on board that first day and knowing that for the next however many days, in this case it was a 7 day itinerary, I didn't really have to worry about anything. I could do what I wanted. I could go eat when I wanted to eat. I could go sit by the pool when I wanted to sit by the pool, and there wasn't a real strict schedule. And
Hmm.
I fell in love with it. Uh,
What was the ship?
it was the Caribbean Princess. So it was actually its inaugural season. So the ship was pretty much brand new when I sailed on her. The one thing I will mention is, you know, the at the time I was in college, and the night life seemed a little bit lacking on Princess. And so when it came time to go do my next cruise, of course, I started doing some research. And that's when I sort of discovered Carnival. And it had a lot of the things that I loved about the Princess sailing, but the nightlife was leaps and bounds better from a 20 something year old's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a while, I only cruised Carnival. And then, in those early years, I was doing one, maybe two. Like I said, I was in college. I wasn't making a ton of money yet. And I started to sort of do more sailings as I started to get into this realm of social media and cruising.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until probably around 2006, 2015, 2016, I started up a Facebook group. It was called Cruise Life Group. And it really kind of kicked off this whole thing with social media. And as I learned early on, the more content you want and the more content you need to procure, the more sailings you need to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that started to pick up my pace a little bit, probably around that 2016 timeframe, and started, doing a few cruises a year, and it's kind of been that way ever since. Um,
It's funny you say that, when you're putting out content, in order to get content, you have to cruise. So what I say to my wife, she complains sometimes, why do we have to cruise so much? And my answer is simply research.
mhm,
You got to research. So
of course.
so cruise life, Matt, is massively successful, especially on IG. I'm sure largely because of your amazing drone photography. So tell the listeners, what is drone photography and how do you employ it with cruise ships?
So I, I'm going to back up a little bit before the drone stuff came in, just to give you a little background on how this whole Cruise Life Mat thing started. As I mentioned a minute ago, there was that Facebook group that I was running, um, trying to find ways to get that in front of bigger audiences, right? Wanted to grow the group, wanted to get more members. And one of the ways I started doing that was by doing like blog posts as a guest on other people's sites. And in exchange for writing those blog posts, they would let me, put all my, hey, go follow me here, join my group here. And that worked for a while. It obviously brought people to the group. But I soon realized that maybe building my own blog site made a little bit more sense, right? You can still do all these blog posts that are informative and helpful to cruisers. But I can be driving traffic to myself versus somebody else. And so it was around that time in 2016, I decided to create cruiselifemat.com. And I started writing a lot of blog posts there. But as you know, when you're, curating content, like things need to be edgy and new and exciting. And around 2017, 2018, you started to see this uptick in drone content. Drones were becoming more easily accessible by the regular consumer. It wasn't a $3, $4, $5,000 drone that you needed to go do this kind of stuff. You could go get a $500 or $1,000 drone and get some pretty amazing stuff. So it was around
Mm-hmm.
that time in like 2017 or so. I think maybe beginning of 2018, I got my first drone, and it was. I don't know if I was naive at the time or it was just a lack of understanding about all the rules around it. Um, but my process of obtaining drone content was not what it is today. There's so many rules and regulations now. All cruise lines have their own rules around, which lines allow you to bring them on board, which ones don't. Um, at that time, it was like, oh, I put it in my bag. If somebody said something, somebody said something. If they didn't, they didn't. There's been plenty of times where I was asked not to fly while I was flying, so had to bring it down. But looking back on that, I'm glad that eventually I learned the ways, right? And me and some of my drone buddies in the cruise social media realm, we try to um, kind of portray that want to follow the rules, right? And it's an interesting space because obviously you want the good content, but you want to do it legally, and you don't want to have a lawsuit coming your way or anything like that. So there's just so much to learn with it. I'm still learning every day. Obviously, the perspective from a drone is completely different and unique, like I said, and so it's attractive to people to view those videos or share those photos. But yeah, just so much to learn with it every day. I mean, I just had this trip on the Jade, all these new countries. I had to learn where I could fly, where I couldn't fly, what kind of permissions I needed, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot to it. But really, it was to answer your question. It was that want to create unique and different content, and it's becoming more popular. You see more and more accounts using it. So it's just fine. And now it's just finding new ways to utilize it. Right. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into the whole niche of cruising and droning. And it's an exciting niche to be in.
Now you're a certified FAA drone pilot. So what does that mean? And talk about the process to add that credential.
Yeah, so pretty much here in the U.S. anyway, if you want to drone commercially, aka make money from flying your drone, you can't do so as a hobbyist. You need what they call a Part 107 license. You need this license. There's no way around it. Anyone 16 and older can take the test. There's no required education prior to taking the test, but obviously you want to pass and not take it, numerous times. I forget what the fee is to take it, but it's not cheap. And so obviously something you want to study for or take a class on. I personally didn't take a class. The most effective way I found was watching a few YouTube videos and watching them over and over, especially the week or two leading up to my test. I passed on my first shot, and that was about a year ago now that I actually got the license. So it obviously it's needed for me to do any sort of commercial applications. So it was just a requirement I needed to check off. The other thing is there's a few other quirky rules around having this license that allow you to do certain things that you can't as a hobbyist. One of those is flying at night. So if you do not hold a Part 107 license, you cannot fly a drone at night. Obviously, sometimes getting some of these ships coming in very early to, especially like New York Harbor, things like that, it's pitch black out. And it's just another added bonus as to why, I wanted to obtain it.
Yeah, you have some gorgeous night shots.
I appreciate it. There's a whole lot of learning curve around that too. The first time that I went and flew at night, I didn't have the right set of filters on, and the footage just didn't look great. So it's a learning curve everywhere. Every aspect of it. Yeah. So I mean, anybody can go get that license.
So I imagine the pandemic was particularly tough for you, with cruising being such a major aspect of what you do. Did you do anything special during that downtime? Run a marathon? Go grow a garden?
So I did, to answer your question. The pandemic and the cruise shutdown was really hard for me. I look back on it now, and I don't know that I approached the situation, correctly for myself and my family. I don't think I appreciated that time at home with my family, and probably something I should have done a little bit more, and not been so focused on like, oh my God, I can't cruise. What am I going to do? How I can't cruise? I don't know what to do with myself. And like I said, looking back, I wish I viewed it a little bit differently at the time. But here we are. The good news is, at the beginning of the pandemic, we bought a new RV. We had been into camping since forever, really. But we always had travel trailers, and we did more stuff locally. When the whole pandemic hit, RVing and camping was something that kind of was one of the first things to open back up. You could do that being, distant from people. And so right towards the beginning of the pandemic, we actually went in and traded in our travel trailer and bought a drivable RV. And we took some awesome trips. I actually started another Instagram account all about our travels in the RV. And it really filled that void for me of wanting to share my adventures. And we went to some awesome places. The furthest we drove was down to the Florida Keys.
Hmm.
Not quite down to Key West, but pretty darn close.
So, so
And yeah,
did you start the RV channel during the pandemic, during the shutdown?
I did. I
That was very productive. That's better than a one shot deal. It's a whole
it
new passion.
it was, and really it filled that void. For the first few months of the pandemic, it was like, what do I do with myself? Like I need something to fill my free time, right? Because it was like we were all working from home, the kids were going to school from home, and we'd log on in the morning and then we'd log off at night, and it's like, okay, what do we do now? And the being able to go on the RV trips and being able to share that, and creating all this new stuff around that really really helped my my mental stability at the time. So yeah, it really helped us get through. I mean, we got a lot of use out of it in like 2020, 2021. Like I said, we went to the Florida Keys. We went to Myrtle Beach several times. In fact, the last 3 years we've driven down to Myrtle Beach in it between Christmas and New Year's. Yeah, it's been a great thing for us. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would have done if we didn't pick that up.
You know, a couple of years ago, discussion of RVs would have kind of went right over my head, went right by me. But now I'm kind of interested, not so much in getting one or actually participating, but just hearing about it, because my brother-in-law is in the market for, very, very high-end RV. And so every time we're
Hmm.
together, we talk a lot about RVs. And so I've seen all kind of YouTube videos. So I have shared your RV information because I know he's gonna eat that up.
Awesome,
And I got a feeling I have to
awesome.
ask him. Because the time you started it seems like a perfect time during the pandemic, and he hasn't always been hooked on RVs. So I wonder, is that a product of, because he's a heavy cruiser as well, and I wonder, is that
Hmm.
a product of being shut down? So what was your first cruise after the lockdown ended?
So my first cruise back was the Norwegian Gem in August of 2021. I think cruising had actually restarted a little bit like a month earlier, so I was a little bit late to the game. But yeah, I mean, it was exciting to be back. I remember, walking on board that first time, waiting for that COVID test to come back, and am I actually going to be able to get on the ship? Walking up the gangway that first time, I mean, it was just
Yeah,
chills. Um, it was special.
I remember my first cruise back, and I'm not gonna lie, my eyes watered over. Uh,
Hmm.
I didn't get back as fast as you did. I had planned an earlier cruise, and then what was the COVID?
Oh, the variant.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a uptick, and as a matter
Hmm.
of fact, the in Atlanta.
Oh, the CDC.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I had a brain freeze for a minute. CDC came out with that recommendation. I think it was in December, recommending no one cruise. And at the
Hmm.
time, I was kind of going through a little medical thing. I had my comeback cruise was coming up, and I just decided it was too risky, and I canceled it.
Yep.
By the time the cruise came, that variant had died down, so I could have gone on it.
Yep.
So I was a little delayed in coming back, but yeah, that stepping foot on that first ship was, oh my goodness. It was like this is
Definitely.
where I belong.
Yep. I hear that.
So I'm sure you've gone on a series of cruises since the lockdown. How many you think you've gone on since you came back?
So I looked that up earlier. I've been on 12 cruises since the return.
Mhm. Any
Um,
highlights?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, that first one back, I mean, just all the emotions around that. And then so that sailing was just myself The next one that stands out is spring break of 2022. Me, my wife, and my kids went on the Norwegian Bliss out of LA, doing Mexican Riviera, and that was their return to cruising. So about nine months later or so, so that one really sticks out. I mean, the kids were just before the pandemic were kind of getting into this swing of going on cruises, right? I mean, they were young at the time, and they weren't going a ton prior to that, and one of the first sailings we had canceled was a cruise for the whole family, and so I think that was actually 2 years later, almost to the day, that we went on the Bliss. So that sailing was special. It was also the first time I had gone to the Mexican Riviera. And I definitely need to get back. I sort of fell in love with some of those ports out there. And then the third one that sticks out is the Carnival Celebration Atlantic. It was the inaugural sailing for the celebration and my first transatlantic. That's probably been one cruise that I've had on my bucket list, if you will. And so it was not something I necessarily thought I would do this young.
What's that? A transatlantic, you mean?
Correct.
On your bucket list?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the transatlantic was just something I've wanted to do for a long time. I always thought it would be something I would do like in retirement or something, but the cards played out the way they did, and I was able to go. So yeah, those three cruises are really the three that stick out since the return. All for their own special reasons.
Well, Celebration certainly is a great ship to do a transatlantic on.
Absolutely.
How many sea days did you have?
So we had one or two in the beginning on the first week, and then the second week was 7 days straight of sea days. So we basically went from Tenerife in the Canary Islands to Miami, straight across 7 days.
Wow. Yeah, a transatlantic is on my bucket list, and thankfully it's booked.
Awesome.
So I'll be doing my first transatlantic in, what is it?
Nice.
April of 24. It starts off with 8 sea days. So it's on Virgin Voyages, Scarlet Lady. So I understand that they have tremendous food. So I fully expect in those 8 sea days I'll gain 8 pounds because I'm trying everything.
I hear that.
So what are you working on now at Cruise Life Matt?
So to be honest, I'm trying to find the right. I say work-life balance. I mean, this is more of a hobby for me, but I'm really trying to find that right balance. I tend to either be too focused or not focused enough on it, and just trying to find that right balance. The last few years I've been so focused on growing it, and some other areas of my life probably got neglected because of it. As far as specifically what I'm trying to do at the moment, really just trying to get my foot in the door with the cruise lines, wanting to be considered, to be hired for drone work specifically. It has been gaining some traction. I mean, I could tell you a few years ago, I probably didn't even have good contacts at most of the cruise lines. So, that sort of angle is improving. And I think long term, I'd love to do something like this full time, getting content, traveling, sharing it. But I think that piece is probably a pretty far way out. I have young kids, obviously need to provide for the family first and foremost. And like I said, this is a hobby. It's not my livelihood at the moment. But yeah, it's going in the right direction.
So how can fans follow Cruise Life Matt on social media and the internet?
All right. So you can find me on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and YouTube, all at Cruise Life Matt, same handle. And of course, you can also find my website, cruiselifematt.com. And you can find all my blog posts on there and also links to all my other social media. And then the last way is via the Facebook group that I mentioned a couple times throughout the podcast. It's a Facebook group called Cruise Life Group, and it has a unique URL, cruiselifegroup.com. That'll take you right to the Facebook group page.
Say something about your RV page as well, because we may have some listeners who are interested in that.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, I started another Instagram account around RV travel and specifically around family travel. You can find my content there at RV Camping to Go. I am only on Instagram with that account.
So let's talk about the future. What do you have booked?
So I only have 2 cruises booked at the moment, which is probably the lowest count I've had since the pandemic. Currently have the MSC Meraviglia to Bermuda in November, and the Icon of the Seas in March of 2024. I believe it's like the 6th or 7th sailing on her when she comes out. The Icon sailing is crazy pricey, so I at the moment I'm planning on going, but that may change. It's definitely a lot to pay for a 7-day Caribbean sailing.
Yeah. I'll contact you after the Meraviglia sailing, because just a month after you, I go on my first MSC cruise on Meraviglia. I'm going on at Christmas.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And it gets a lot of. Some people rave about it, and some people hate it. And I know I have to see for myself, but I'd sure like to get the insight, of a knowledgeable cruiser like yourself.
Definitely. That I love that outlook, right? I mean, people can say all sorts of things, but nobody likes all the same things, right? So it's best to go check it out for yourself. I did go on my first MSC sailing back in April. It was a little bit of a one-off sailing in the fact that it was Seaside's first sailing back to Port Canaveral after being home ported somewhere else. And there were some crew visa issues on that sailing, and I heard they sailed about 25% understaffed.
Wow.
So a lot of my issues or complaints was really around the service, and I know that wasn't the norm. So I want to give the experience on MSC another shot. As I said, I'm planning to go in November. There was a lot that I absolutely loved about the experience, and if I go on this sailing and the service is heavily improved, then you know what, I'll be back again.
What's on your bucket list? Travel and otherwise.
Yeah. So, now that I've sort of opened the door to Europe and some of Asia on some of these more recent sailings, prior to last year, I had never been to Europe, never been to Asia. I want to see more of it. And I also want to share some of these new exciting places with my family. I know, like I said, one of the first sailings we had canceled in the pandemic was a Western Mediterranean cruise with my whole family. And my kids were ecstatic to be going to Europe, and it hasn't happened yet. So definitely want to share some of these new exciting places on the other side of the world with them. That's going to be my focus in the near term. Outside of cruising, obviously, I'd like to explore more of the U.S. in the RV, specifically not the East Coast. We've kind of done everything from Maine to Florida on the East Coast. I'd like to start heading, Midwest, West, and check out some of those areas of the country.
Okay, Matt, before we let you go, a couple of, I hope, fun cruise questions, and then perhaps a fun oddball question. I say oddball because it doesn't really relate to cruising. So the first question is just so that I can get some ideas. I just got off of a 16-day cruise, and I never ordered the same drink twice on a day. And that's because I was trying out all of these drinks that I get from these discussions. So my first fun question is, what's your favorite cruise drink and
Hmm.
cruise food?
All right. So cruise drink is pretty easy answer. It's actually something that I only started drinking maybe like 5 years ago, and it's Tito's and soda with a lime. Very, very simple, easy to drink all day. And I discovered that I do not get hangovers if that is all I drink. I wish I had discovered this in my younger years. Drinking all that Bud Light and other
Mhm.
beers all day long, and then just being shot for half of the next day. I live and learn, I guess, right? I mean, it took me until I was almost 40 years old to know that, hey, I could drink
Mhm.
this and not get a hangover. But here we are, and that's kind of my go-to now. As far as food goes, this is a tough one. There's two things that come to mind, and it's not necessarily a specific food, but my favorite restaurant at sea is Food Republic on Norwegian on some of their newer ships. And my favorite meal to date at sea was the chef's table on the Carnival Celebrations Transatlantic. So as far as food goes, those are two things that stick out to me. They were the first things that popped into my head. I know it's not a specific dish or meal, but it's those have been the things I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, chef's table, that's something in all the cruises I've done, I've never taken advantage of that. And a transatlantic sounds like a good place to try that. But,
Absolutely.
my transatlantic is on Scarlet Lady on Virgin Voyages. So, you know, they don't really have a their whole thing is
Yeah,
everything's a chef table, you know.
right. Yeah, it was a great time to try it out, and that was my first one. I had never done it before. Having been on 50 plus cruises before then, and I had never done it. So I was glad that we decided to.
Definitely was worth it, huh?
Oh yeah,
What was that, about $100 a person?
it was. I think it was $99, but yeah, totally worth it.
The next question. So, what's your most memorable or outlandish or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
So we're gonna go with an embarrassing story here because who doesn't love an embarrassing story?
I love embarrassing
Maybe
stories.
other I bet all the listeners will too. So let's go with that and make sure we get everybody laughing by the end of this podcast. Uh, so speaking of hangovers, I was on. This is about 10 years ago now. I was on a short 3-night Bahamas sailing on Carnival Fantasy class ship. I don't remember exactly which one at the moment. Um, but night one was just one of those nights where like you get on board and actually I flew in the day of the cruise, so I was sleep deprived to begin with. And I was sailing with my dad and my brother, and me and my brother just throwing back the beers. And next thing you know, it's like uh, some god awful hour in the morning, and we get to sleep or whatever. And I wake up the next day with this killer hangover. And when I say I literally wasted a third of my cruise, I literally stayed in bed until about 5 p.m. that next
Wow.
day. And at 5 p.m., I'm like, if I don't get up soon, I'm not even gonna have seen the sun today. So I I decide to muster up the energy, get out of bed, get myself together, and I head up to the pool deck. And I'm sitting there at the pool deck. I think my dad actually joined me for a little bit, and I think I don't know if he went down to go to the casino or something, but he left, and it was just me sitting up there on the pool deck. And next thing you know, I say out of nowhere. I should have known better. Out of nowhere, I have the urge like I'm gonna
Oh boy.
vomit, and it's like one of those ones where like you immediately know that you do not have time to get anywhere. And so I grab my shirt. I keep as much as I can in my shirt as I'm running. I say running, walking fast to the bathroom, and I literally just throw out my shirt in the trash. And I still, to this day, I don't know that anybody noticed. It was like that time, like right before dinner, where people are kind of headed in, going to get ready for the night. And, there's some people out on the deck, but I don't know that anybody actually noticed me, like just straight up vomit right on the pool deck. And to this day, like, yeah, it's an embarrassing story. It's not a proud moment, but it's something that I'll remember. And it obviously makes for a good story today on this podcast. So, yeah, it's, one of those moments, you're younger and having a good time, and one thing leads to another, and you're vomiting on the pool deck.
When guests, when I ask guests, or when guests tell me they're an embarrassing moment, I usually, I had one guest, he dressed as Britney Spears for an 80s party on one ship. And so I say to guests, photos or it didn't happen. And he did have photos, and I did post it on the podcast group. In your case, that's all right. No photo needed. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, perfect, because there are no photos.
Even if they were, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
The oddball question, and you have a large following, especially on IG. People love your ship photos. So welcome to the many Cruise Life Matt fans who are listening. Share one thing that my listeners and your followers don't know about Matt.
So there was a few things that I could have gone with here, and I decided I was just going to go with the first thing that popped into my head when I heard the question. This may sound a little crazy, but there are a couple things that I do love more than cruising, and both of my kids play ice hockey, and one of the things that I love is watching them play. I could watch them play all day, every day. Watching them grow and progress on the ice is like the most rewarding thing for me. And just something that I literally never get sick of. I don't care if it's a 7 a.m. ice time, or if we're traveling all over the state to different corners of the state all weekend to get to games. I never get sick of it.
Great. Well, Matt, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. You're one of the few. Most of the guests that I have on the Joy of Cruising podcast are people I have featured. I've written 3 books on cruising, sort of compilations of just fascinating cruising stories from passionate cruisers. And so most of my guests have been people from the books, but every once in a while I feature a content creator or an influencer or just someone I think has obviously passionate about cruising, because that's what I'm passionate about, but also has a very interesting content, very interesting sites. Someone, if I were writing another book about cruising, I would want to interview for the book. And so you're one of the few guests who kind of fit into that category. And I really appreciate you coming back on. I'd love to have you on again in the not too distant future, because clearly you do some great things in cruising. So thank you, Matt, and I hope that we will see you again. All the best to Cruise Life Matt, and take care of yourself.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate all those kind words, and I appreciate you having me on. Again, like you said, I hope to be on here again in the not so distant future.
That's good to hear. As they say, I'll see you on the ocean.
Thanks. See ya.
All right, Matt, you take care.
Yeah, you too.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.